A Netflix documentary made me realize my entire life was a lie. I was homesick last Tuesday, scrolling for something mindless while recovering from food poisoning. I landed on Vanished, Missing Children of the 90 Seconds because it was short and looked like easy background noise. The documentary covered 12 kids who disappeared between 1,990 and 1,999 from different states. Some kidnapped by strangers, others taken by parents, a few who simply vanished without explanation. I was half paying attention, drifting in and out of sleep, until episode 2 showed a photo that made me sit up so fast I nearly fell off the couch. The missing child was Tommy Rivera, age 4, disappeared from a Phoenix grocery store in 1995, but the photo looked exactly like me as a child. Not similar, identical. Same round face, same dark curly hair, same gap in my front teeth, even the same scar above my left eyebrow from falling off my bike when I was 6. I paused and stared at the screen. The resemblance was so perfect it felt like looking at an old family photo, except I'd never seen this particular picture before. I screenshotted it and compared it to childhood photos on my phone. Everything matched perfectly. But according to my parents, I was born in Seattle in 1991, not Phoenix. We'd lived in the same house my entire childhood. Never moved anywhere. I called my mom that evening, trying to sound casual. I mentioned watching this documentary about missing kids and asked about my early childhood, specifically if we'd ever lived in Arizona when I was little. Her response was immediately strange. She got quiet for a long time, then said we'd never been to Arizona, and why was I asking such weird questions? When I pressed for more details about my early years, she became defensive and said she had to help Dad with something. That night, I went through every family photo album in my apartment, the ones my parents had given me when I moved out. Something felt wrong about the pictures. All my baby photos were taken in the same few locations, always the same furniture, same backgrounds. But in the documentary, Tommy's family described living in a blue house with a white fence. In my earliest photos, I could see glimpses of blue exterior walls and what looked like white fence posts. My parents always said we lived in the red brick house on Maple Street my whole childhood. I drove to my parents' house the next day with printed screenshots from the documentary. They weren't home, but I still had my old key. I went straight to their bedroom closet where Mom kept old photo boxes she never organized. Hidden behind winter coats, I found a box I'd never seen before. Inside were documents with different names, old IDs that didn't match our family, and photos of me as a toddler in locations that definitely weren't Seattle. There was also a yellowed newspaper clipping about Tommy Rivera's disappearance, and that's when I found the birth certificate that proved I was the missing child they'd been searching for. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the birth certificate. Tommy Rivera, Phoenix, Arizona. The photo on the documentary wasn't just similar, it was me. I am Tommy Rivera. I am the missing child from that grocery store in Phoenix. I sit on my parents' bedroom floor, surrounded by evidence of their deception, trying to breathe through waves of nausea. The yellowed newspaper clipping trembles in my grip. 4-year-old Tommy Rivera, missing, parents desperate for answers. There's a photo of a woman clutching a teddy bear, tears streaming down her face. My biological mother, a woman I've never met but whose DNA I carry. The sound of the garage door opening sends a jolt of adrenaline through me. They're home. My parents know. My kidnappers are home. I gather the evidence with shaking hands, stumbling down the stairs just as they walk through the door. Hey, sweetie. What a nice surprise, Mom says, her smile faltering when she sees my face. What's wrong? Are you still feeling sick? Dad sets down grocery bags, his eyes darting to the documents clutched in my hands. His face drains of color. Who am I? My voice sounds foreign to my own ears. Who am I really? Mom's hand flies to her mouth. Dad reaches for the counter to steady himself. Where did you find those? He asks, his voice barely above a whisper. I spread the documents on the kitchen counter. The birth certificate, the newspaper clipping, the photos of me in the blue house with the white fence, the evidence of their lies. I watched a documentary about missing children, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. Tommy Rivera disappeared from a Phoenix grocery store in 1995. I saw his photo. It was me. Mom collapses into a kitchen chair, her body folding in on itself. Dad remains frozen, staring at the evidence like it might disappear if he looks hard enough. We were going to tell you, Mom says finally, tears streaming down her face. We always planned to tell you when you were old enough to understand. Understand what? I slam my hand on the counter. That you stole me? That my entire life is built on a kidnapping? It wasn't like that, Dad interjects, his voice pleading. We loved you from the moment we saw you. We've always loved you. End glow. Then explain. I demand. Pointing to the birth certificate. Explain how I went from being Tommy Rivera in Phoenix to your son in Seattle. They exchange a look, the same look they've shared my entire life when making difficult decisions. Only now I recognize it for what it is, the silent communication of conspirators. We couldn't have children. Mom begins, her voice breaking. We tried for 7 years, 3 miscarriages. The last one nearly killed me. The doctors said I couldn't try again. Dad moves to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. We were desperate. We'd been through every fertility treatment, every adoption agency, either rejected or put on waiting lists that stretched for years. So you decided to steal someone else's child? The words taste bitter in my mouth. We were in Phoenix visiting my sister. Mom continues, ignoring my question. We went to the grocery store, and there you were, sitting in a shopping cart while your mother was arguing with someone in the next aisle. You were playing with a little toy car, Dad adds, his eyes distant with the memory. You smiled at us, and something just broke inside us. Your mother took you to the bathroom, Mom says. I followed her in. She left you by the sink while she went into a stall. I just picked you up and walked out. The casual way she describes kidnapping me makes my stomach turn. I grip the counter to keep from falling. Dad was waiting in the car, she continues. We drove straight to the airport, used our return tickets to fly back to Seattle. We had already been planning to move to a new neighborhood. We just accelerated our plans. We created new identities. Dad explains. I had a contact who could make documents, birth certificates, social security cards. We changed our names, moved into the red brick house on Maple Street. You told everyone I was born in 1991, I say, piecing it together. You erased 4 years of my life. Mom nods, tears streaming down her face. You were young enough that after a few months, you stopped asking about your other mommy. We told you those were just dreams. The memory hits me like a physical blow, confused dreams of a woman with dark hair singing to me in Spanish, a man throwing me in the air while I laughed. Dreams my parents dismissed, told me weren't real. Do you have any idea what you did? I ask, my voice rising. There's a family out there who has spent 28 years wondering what happened to their son, wondering if I'm dead or alive. Did you ever think about them? Did you ever care? Of course we cared, Dad insists. We watched the news reports, we saw the searches. It tore us apart inside. But not enough to return me, I say flatly. By then it was too late, Mom whispers. We'd already fallen in love with you. The thought of losing you, of going to prison, we couldn't do it. I look at these people, these strangers who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped with my homework and cheered at my graduation, who loved me and lied to me every single day of my life. I don't know who you are anymore, I say, gathering the documents. And I don't know who I am either. Please. Mom reaches for me, her fingers trembling. You're our son. Nothing changes that. We made a terrible mistake, but everything we've done since then was built on a lie, I finish for her. My whole identity is a lie. I back toward the door, clutching the evidence to my chest. What are you going to do? Dad asks, fear etched into every line of his face. The question hangs in the air between us. What am I going to do? Report them to the police? Contact the Riveras? Pretend I never discovered the truth? I don't know, I answer honestly, but I can't stay here right now. I walk out the door, leaving behind the only parents I've ever known, carrying the weight of a truth that will change everything for me, for them, and for a family in Phoenix who lost their little boy 28 years ago. I spend the next 3 hours in my car, driving aimlessly through Seattle neighborhoods, trying to process what I've just learned. Every memory I have feels contaminated now. My 6th birthday party wasn't my 6th birthday at all. I was actually 10. The scar above my left eyebrow didn't come from falling off my bike when I was 6. I was 10 then too. My entire timeline is wrong. When my phone battery hits 5%, I finally pull into a Starbucks parking lot. I need to charge my phone and figure out what to do next. The documents are spread across my passenger seat, evidence of my stolen life. Inside, I order a coffee I don't want, and plug in my phone at a corner table. My hands are still trembling as I open my laptop and type, "Vanished, missing children of the 90 seconds" into the search bar. The documentary's website appears, along with contact information for the producers. Before I can talk myself out of it, I click on the Contact Us link and start typing. My name is, I pause, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Who am I? The person I thought I was doesn't exist. I delete the sentence and start again. I watched your documentary last week. I believe I am Tommy Rivera, who disappeared from Phoenix in 1995. I have evidence that the people who raised me kidnapped me and created false identities for all of us. I attach photos of the birth certificate and newspaper clipping, then hit send before I can change my mind. 20 minutes later, my phone rings with an unknown number. Hello? My voice cracks. This is Diane Mercer from Horizon Documentaries, says a woman's voice. I received your email about Tommy Rivera. Is this a serious inquiry? Yes, I whisper, glancing around the coffee shop. I found documents. My parents, the people who raised me, admitted everything. There's a long pause. We need to meet. I can be in Seattle tomorrow morning. The next 18 hours pass in a blur. I check into a hotel, too afraid to return to my apartment where my parents might find me. I don't sleep. Instead, I search online for every article about Tommy Rivera's disappearance, piecing together the life that was stolen from me. By 9 a.m., I'm sitting across from Diane Mercer and a man she introduces as Detective Carlos Ramirez from the Phoenix Police Department's Cold Case Unit. They've flown in overnight. We need to proceed carefully, Detective Ramirez explains. This case has been open for 28 years. If what you're saying is true, it could bring closure to a family that's been suffering for decades. I understand, I say, though I don't. How could I possibly understand any of this? We'd like to take a DNA sample, Diane says gently. The Riveras provided samples years ago. We can compare and know for certain. I nod, numb, as Detective Ramirez swabs the inside of my cheek. What happens next? I ask. To my parents, the people who took me? Kidnapping has no statute of limitations, he explains. If the DNA confirms your identity, we'll need to make arrests. There will be charges for kidnapping, identity fraud, possibly more. The reality of what I've set in motion crashes over me. They raised me, I whisper. They loved me. They stole you, Diane says firmly. They stole you from parents who have spent nearly 3 decades wondering if you were dead or alive. 2 days later, the DNA results confirm what I already know. I am Tommy Rivera. The media explodes with the news. Missing child found after 28 years, screams every headline. My phone won't stop ringing with calls from reporters. Someone leaks my address, and I return to my apartment to find journalists camped outside. I watch from a distance as police cars pull up to my parents' house. They're led out in handcuffs. My mother sobbing, my father's head bowed in shame. The neighbors stand on their lawns, watching in horror as the people they've known for decades are revealed as kidnappers. The worst part is the questions. Who am I now? Am I the person I was raised to be? Or am I Tommy Rivera, a 4-year-old boy frozen in time? Every aspect of my identity feels like a lie. My name, my birthday, my childhood memories, even my college degree, obtained under a false identity. My phone rings again. It's Detective Ramirez. The Riveras want to meet you, he says. Your biological parents. They're flying to Seattle tomorrow. I sit on my couch, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and try to imagine meeting strangers who are my flesh and blood. What will they expect from me? Will they want their 4-year-old back? That child doesn't exist anymore. The media frenzy intensifies. Someone digs up my work history, my social media, my college records, all under my false identity. Experts debate on television about the psychological impact of discovering you're a kidnapping victim. Friends call, confused and concerned. But I don't know what to tell them. I'm not the person they knew. My parents are denied bail. The prosecutor calls them flight risks, citing their history of creating false identities. I watch the courtroom footage, feeling sick as the charges are read. Kidnapping, identity fraud, falsification of government documents, interference with custody. They're facing 25 years to life, Detective Ramirez tells me when I call him. The evidence is overwhelming. That night, I dream of the blue house with the white fence. In the dream, I'm playing in the yard while a woman calls to me in Spanish. I wake up crying, mourning for the life I should have had, and for the people who raised me, criminals though they are. My phone buzzes with a text from Detective Ramirez. The Rivera's flight lands at 1:00 a.m. They're eager to meet you. I stare at the message, paralyzed by the knowledge that tomorrow I'll come face to face with my true beginning. The people who gave me life, whose child was stolen, who never stopped looking for me. I wonder if they'll recognize anything of that 4-year-old boy and the 32-year-old stranger I've become. I close my eyes and try to remember something, anything from before. A lullaby in Spanish, the smell of my mother's perfume, my father's laugh. But all I can recall are the memories given to me by kidnappers, the only parents I've ever known. The airport feels surreal. I'm standing in the arrivals area, scanning the crowd for faces I've never seen but who share my DNA. Detective Ramirez stands beside me, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. You okay? He asks, noticing my trembling hands. No, I answer honestly. How am I supposed to be okay with any of this? He nods, understanding in his eyes. They're nervous too. They've been waiting for this moment for 28 years. That's when I see them, a middle-aged couple walking slowly through the terminal, flanked by a younger woman and man who must be in their 20s, the Riveras, my biological family. The woman, my mother, has her hand pressed against her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. The man, my father, has his arm around her shoulders, his expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. Detective Ramirez raises his hand to signal them, and suddenly they're rushing toward me. My biological mother reaches me first, her hands hovering inches from my face like she's afraid I'll disappear if she touches me. Tommy, she whispers in Spanish, then switches to English. My Tommy. I don't know what to say. I don't know who Tommy is. I'm not him, not really, but I'm not who I thought I was either. Hi, I manage. My voice barely audible. She breaks down completely then, sobbing as she wraps her arms around me. I stand stiffly, not returning the embrace but not pulling away either. Over her shoulder, I see my biological father wiping tears from his eyes. You have her eyes, he says, his voice thick with emotion. You always had her eyes. We move to a private conference room the airport provided after Detective Ramirez made arrangements. The younger woman introduces herself as Carmen, my sister, who was born 3 years after I disappeared. The young man is Miguel, born 2 years after that. Siblings I never knew I had. We grew up hearing stories about you, Carmen says, studying my face. Mom and Dad never stopped looking. They never gave up hope. My biological mother, Elena is her name, opens a tattered photo album she's brought with her. I want to show you who you were, she says softly, before they took you from us. The photos show a smiling toddler with dark hair and eyes, playing in a yard in front of a blue house with a white fence. There I am in a kiddie pool, squealing with delight as my father sprays me with a garden hose. Another shows me on my 3rd birthday, chocolate cake smeared across my face, a plastic fire truck clutched in my hands. That was your favorite toy, my father Roberto says, pointing to the truck. You took it everywhere, even to the grocery store that day. The day I disappeared, the day my life was stolen. Did they? Elena hesitates, her voice breaking. Did they treat you well? The people who took you? The question hits me like a physical blow. How do I answer that? Do I tell her that my kidnappers were loving parents who read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike? Do I tell her that the woman who stole me from that bathroom held me through nightmares and nursed me through fevers? Yes, I say finally, they did. The silence that follows is heavy with conflicting emotions. I can see the relief in Elena's eyes, but also something else, jealousy, perhaps, or resentment that strangers got to witness all the milestones she missed. We brought you this, Roberto says, breaking the tension. He hands me a small, worn fire truck. Its red paint chipped and faded. We saved all your toys. We kept your room exactly as it was. We always believed you'd come home someday. I take the truck, turning it over in my hands. It feels foreign, a relic from a life I can't remember. I'm sorry, I say, not knowing what else to offer. I don't remember any of this. Elena reaches for my hand. It's not your fault, mijo. You were so young. We can help you remember, Miguel adds eagerly. We can tell you everything about your first 4 years, but that's just it. They can tell me about Tommy Rivera's first 4 years. But what about the 28 years that followed? The years I lived as someone else entirely? I have questions, I say, setting down the fire truck. About what happens now? Detective Ramirez, who's been sitting quietly in the corner, steps forward. That's understandable. This is an unprecedented situation. Do you expect me to move to Phoenix? I ask, directing the question to my biological parents. To just leave my life here and become Tommy Rivera again? The hope in their eyes dims slightly. We just want to know you, Elena says carefully, to be part of your life in whatever way you'll allow. We know you're not 4 years old anymore, Roberto adds. We don't expect to pick up where we left off. But I can see in their body language that's exactly what part of them wants to reclaim the child they lost, to somehow make up for 28 years of absence. That evening, after an emotionally exhausting day with the Riveras, I visit my parents, the people who raised me in jail. The contrast between the joyful reunion at the airport and the sterile visitation room is jarring. My mother looks small in her orange jumpsuit, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. My father seems to have aged a decade in just a few days. You met them, my mother says. It's not a question. I nod. They seem like good people. They are, my father says quietly. We watched them on the news for months after we took you. They loved you very much. Then why? I ask, the question that's been burning inside me. Why would you do that to them? My mother leans forward, her hands pressed against the glass between us. I was dying, she whispers. I stare at her, not comprehending. What? I had stage 4 ovarian cancer, she continues. The doctors gave me 6 months. We'd tried for years to have a child, and I was going to die without ever being a mother. My father takes over, his voice barely audible. The cancer went into remission. A miracle, the doctors called it. By then, we'd already taken you, already created our new lives. We couldn't go back. So you just kept me? The anger rises in my throat. You let another family suffer for decades because it was convenient for you? No, my mother says fiercely. Because we loved you. Because you became our son in every way that mattered. Because the thought of losing you was worse than any prison sentence. I sit back, overwhelmed by the competing narratives of my existence. 2 families who love me. 2 sets of parents who claim me as their child. 1 life split in 2 by a single moment of desperation in a grocery store bathroom. I don't know how to feel about any of this. I admit, I don't know who I am anymore. You're the same person you've always been, my father insists. Your name and your history might be different, but who you are, your character, your values, those came from inside you. And from how we raised you, my mother adds softly. As I leave the jail, Detective Ramirez is waiting for me in the parking lot. The Riveras want to have dinner tonight, he says. They're staying at the Marriott downtown. I nod, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. I'll be there. It's going to take time, he says, his voice gentler than I've heard it before, for all of you to figure out what this relationship looks like going forward. What if I can't be who they want me to be? I ask, voicing my deepest fear. What if I can't be Tommy? You don't have to be 4-year-old Tommy, he says. You just have to be yourself, whoever that is. They'll have to accept that, or they'll lose you all over again. As I drive toward the hotel, I realize that's the heart of my struggle. For 28 years, I've been one person. Now I'm expected to be someone else, to embrace an identity that was stolen from me before I could even form memories of it. Somewhere between the person I was raised to be and the person I was born to be lies the truth of who I really am. I just have to figure out how to reconcile those 2 halves of my fractured existence and hope that both families can accept the person I choose to become. The courtroom feels impossibly small for the weight it carries today. Both sets of my parents sit on opposite sides, separated by a wooden barrier that might as well be the Grand Canyon. The Riveras are huddled together on the left, Elena clutching Roberto's hand so tightly her knuckles have gone white. Carmen and Miguel flank them like protective sentinels. On the right, my Seattle parents, I still struggle with what to call them, sit in orange jumpsuits, their ankles shackled beneath the table. They look diminished, hollowed out by 3 weeks in county jail awaiting this hearing. I'm seated in the middle row, Detective Ramirez beside me. The courtroom is closed to the press, but that hasn't stopped them from camping outside the building, shouting questions whenever anyone enters or exits. My face has been splashed across every news outlet for weeks. The man who discovered he was kidnapped, as if my entire identity has been reduced to this single traumatic revelation. The prosecution calls Thomas Rivera to the stand. I flinch at the name. It still feels foreign, like someone calling out to a stranger. I stand on legs that feel like they might give way beneath me. As I walk to the witness stand, I catch my Seattle mother's eye. She gives me a trembling smile that breaks my heart all over again. After I'm sworn in, the prosecutor approaches. She's a severe woman with sharp features and sharper eyes. Mr. Rivera, could you please tell the court about the day you discovered your true identity? I clear my throat. I was homesick with food poisoning last Tuesday. I was watching a documentary on Netflix called Vanished: Missing Children of the 90 Seconds. In the second episode, they showed a photo of Tommy Rivera, who disappeared from a Phoenix grocery store in 1995. My voice catches. It was me. I recognized myself immediately. And what did you do then? I describe finding the birth certificate, confronting my parents, their confession. With each word, I feel like I'm betraying them, even though they betrayed me first, in the most fundamental way possible. Mr. Rivera, the prosecutor continues, how has this discovery affected you? I look between both sets of parents, these strangers who each claim me as their own. I don't know who I am anymore. I admit, for 28 years, I believed I was born in Seattle in 1991. I have memories of growing up in a red brick house on Maple Street. I remember getting this scar above my eyebrow when I fell off my bike at 6. Except I wasn't 6. I was 10. I wasn't born in Seattle. My entire timeline is wrong. My entire life is wrong. Elena stifles a sob. My Seattle mother's face crumples. Yet the defendants raised you as their son. The prosecutor states. They provided for you, educated you, loved you, while allowing your biological family to suffer for decades, believing you might be dead. Objection, the defense attorney calls. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge says. The prosecutor pivots. Mr. Rivera, in your own words, how do you feel about the defendants now? I take a deep breath. This is the question I've been dreading. I'm angry, I begin, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm furious that they stole me, that they lied to me every day of my life. But I look directly at my Seattle parents. They're still the people who raised me, who taught me to read, who held me when I cried, who shaped who I am. I can't just erase 28 years of love because I've learned it was built on a lie. I turn to the Riveras, and I feel guilty for saying that, because another family has suffered unimaginably because of what they did. The Riveras lost their son. They deserve justice. The courtroom is silent when I finish. The defense attorney rises for cross-examination, approaching cautiously. You mentioned that the defendants told you about your mother's Mrs. Johnson's terminal cancer diagnosis at the time of the kidnapping. Could you elaborate on that? She said she had stage 4 ovarian cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months to live. She and my father had tried for years to have children. She was going to die without ever being a mother. And what happened with her cancer? It went into remission. The doctors called it a miracle. So by the time they realized she would survive, they had already established new identities in Seattle? Yes. And returning you at that point would have meant prison for them and losing you forever? Objection, the prosecutor interjects, leading the witness. Sustained, the defense attorney nods. Mr. Rivera, in your own assessment, were you well cared for by the defendants? Yes, I answer honestly. They were good parents, loving parents. No further questions. After I step down, both attorneys make their closing arguments. The prosecutor emphasizes the devastating impact on the Rivera family, the years of deception, the calculated nature of the identity fraud. The defense attorney speaks of a desperate, dying woman who made a terrible mistake, then found herself trapped by it when she unexpectedly survived. When the judge returns with his decision, the courtroom holds its collective breath. In my 20 years on the bench, I've never encountered a case quite like this one. He begins. What the defendants did was inexcusable. They stole a child from his family and maintained that deception for nearly 3 decades. My Seattle parents bow their heads. However, I must also acknowledge that they provided a loving home and raised Mr. Rivera to be a productive member of society. The unusual circumstances of Mrs. Johnson's terminal diagnosis at the time of the kidnapping, while not excusing her actions, does provide context. The judge looks directly at my Seattle parents. Mary and David Johnson, I hereby sentence you each to 10 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5 years. Additionally, you will pay restitution to the Rivera family in an amount to be determined in civil court. 10 years. The number hangs in the air. My Seattle mother Mary begins to cry silently. David reaches for her hand across the table. Tommy, Mary calls out as they're led away. We love you. We've always loved you. I can't speak. Can't move. I just watch as the only parents I've ever known are taken through a side door, out of my life. Afterward, in the courthouse hallway, Elena approaches me hesitantly. We don't want to pressure you, she says. We know this is impossible for you. We'd like you to visit Phoenix, Roberto adds. See the house where you lived your first 4 years. Meet your extended family, but only when you're ready. I nod, grateful for their understanding. I need time to process everything. Of course, Elena says. We've waited 28 years. We can wait a little longer. 6 months later, I'm standing in front of a blue house with a white fence in Phoenix. The Rivera family, my biological family, stands behind me, giving me space as I take in the home I can't remember. I've spent these months establishing boundaries, building relationships slowly. I've learned to speak Spanish again, words returning to me like echoes from a forgotten dream. I've also visited Mary and David in prison twice. Those visits were painful, but necessary. I'm not ready to forgive them, but I'm trying to understand. This was your favorite spot, Elena says, pointing to a corner of the yard, where a plastic slide now stands for Miguel's young daughter. You used to play with your trucks here for hours. I close my eyes, trying to summon a memory that isn't there, but something else comes instead, not a memory, but a feeling. A sense of belonging that has nothing to do with DNA or legal documents or birth certificates. I'm not Tommy, I say finally, turning to face them. Not the Tommy you lost. I can't be him. Pain flashes across Elena's face, but she nods. We know. Active and a climb. But I'm not entirely the person I was raised to be either, I continue. I'm something in between. Both of those people and neither of them at the same time. Roberto steps forward. Then who are you? It's the question I've been wrestling with since that Tuesday, when food poisoning led me to a documentary that shattered my world. Who am I when everything I believed about myself was a lie? I'm still figuring that out, I answer honestly, but I'd like to do it with all of you in my life, if that's okay. Elena's eyes fill with tears, but she's smiling. More than okay. As we walk toward the blue house with the white fence, I realize that identity isn't something fixed and unchangeable. It's fluid, constantly evolving. My story didn't begin in Seattle in 1991, nor did it begin in Phoenix in 1991. It began in both places and continues to be written every day. I am Tommy Rivera. I am the person raised in Seattle. I am both. I am neither. And I am something entirely new. A person forged in the collision of 2 families, 2 histories, 2 truths. And somehow, that feels like enough.